So I just want to understand, if you don't have a diagnosis or an assessment or some sort of categorization of what's going on, how do you help a person? If we don't have, a label or, you got to hold on to something so that you can figure out how to help the person, right?
I think therapists are in a terrible position of trying to apply a category from the DSM-V and look at a person who has emotional pain, or their emotionality is a socially complex activity with endless variation. The medical model has nothing to do with that, with helping people who are experiencing and want, or even don't have pain but really want to grow emotionally, create some new emotional experiences for themselves. The methodology is handicapping of their capacity to give and to help people develop and create environments because it's so measured and ruled.
We need to have some kind of criteria, at least in a certain area of this allocation of resources, and some criteria that a parent advocate can know how to prepare a case and win those services in a fair way for their children.
This is the time to put on sociological glasses and look at classification, because classification is a social act, the creation of diagnostic categories. And diagnostic categories have a social life. They come into being because of, in a particular context, because particular people have particular understandings and interests, and they also pass away too because the context changed. But by the time they implemented them, diagnostic practice, clinical practice already moved further because of other forces, because of demand from the parents, because the prototypes were changing, because new kids were showing up. Because he changed the diagnostic criteria, new kids started to show up. So for a variety of reasons, changes are not necessarily as consequential. In fact, in my own research, I find that the DSM kind of follows clinical practice rather than dictating it.
Diagnosis is a social political activity, it's a phenomena that functions as a means of social control. That's what I think. It decides who's going to benefit and who's not going to benefit from services, insurance companies, medications. And it also decides who gets the socially acceptable label and who gets the not so acceptable label, as Asperger's being much more palatable to many people. Children will come in and say, I have Asperger's, I do not have autism. I'm brilliant.
I'm thinking of what do I want to call it? The pragmatic aspects of what we're talking about. And I think that's the hard part to say. I think it's like, well, Lois, you just don't understand. There's nothing wrong with diagnosis or the human cost. We have to weigh the human cost on these kids who are going to get help and so on. But what's pragmatic is tied to what it is you want to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason that over 250,000 professionals, 50 associations representing over 250,000 professionals, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health workers, and so on, have protested and signed this open letter. I think it's because some critical mass happened, and they are saying, my desire to relate human to human and to help you is coming in conflict now with this thing. So it depends on what your goal is, and if your goal is to deal with symptoms, then you do this, and if your goal is to go to Neil, right? Yeah. Neil's point about creativity, then you are upset by this.
We're talking about DSM, classifying people, but it doesn't raise the bar for the people working for the client. And I feel that in some way, the DSM should raise the bar for those assistants who don't have prior experience or who learn as they go along.
What I'm concerned about is the training people get.
Yeah.
So the training people get, and the both the medical model and the natural science model is what you're taught, and so we're losing like valuable years. So it's kind of like the reverse of teaching in a way. In teaching, you learn all these wonderful. If you go to become a teacher, you learn these wonderful holistic, cooperative, blah 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 theories, and then you get to school and you're not allowed to do them. And in this field, it seems kind of the opposite. That the training is unbelievably narrow. The word holistic does not appear in psychiatry, and
We find ways to describe each other and talk about our experiences with each other. In group therapy, we mix children and families, some of whom are autistic, some of whom are not, some of whom are just having difficulty in school. That social environment is a very rich collective environment that helps everyone grow and develop because they learn from each other. And in that context of children and adults together, you can see things. Parents, they almost 90% of the time say, I've never seen my child before. I've seen them this way. I had no idea that they were capable of this kind of relationality because they see them as their child, or I see them as my patient, whatever. In a group, there's all kinds of other possibilities that can emerge, and you keep working with what's emerging.
But then what happens when you have, for example, let's just say you have a parent who's completely not looking at the fact that there's an issue, which I think happens a lot, and basically you're not labeling anything. You're saying, oh, he's so creative, he's so, he thinks differently, whatever, and then that person keeps getting ignored because, oh, they're fine, they're just different and creative.
But we're not saying they're just different and creative. We are saying that there is a lack of development in certain areas. That you can see that in a group setting. There is lack of development. That's talked about very honestly to parents. And parents have to decide whether they want to participate in a process where how they see is going to be challenged. And it's hard. It's very hard.
And you feel that can be done without the labels, basically, like without.
It has been done without the labels, effectively.
None of their constituencies is happy. The scientists are not happy at all. Some of the revisions in DSM-V is because the geneticists are saying, give us something simple. Don't try to categorize. Just give us a blanket category and we can work with what's in it. And similarly, therapists and parents, if they could articulate this, would say the same thing. Give us a blanket category that we can work with more flexibly. So DSM-5, for example, eliminates Asperger's and eliminates PDD-NOS and said there should be only one diagnosis of autism modulated by severity. That's good. But I say, why not open it up completely? Why do you need the categorical distinctions between different disorders? We already have, for example, in many places in this country, an assessment of delay, which is not done by psychiatrists, is done by teams of professionals, psychologists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and what they do is they look at an individual child, and they are not interested in what's the diagnosis. They're interested in the question of what are the needs of this child, where are the strengths, and what kind of services or therapies would be helpful.
I want to join me in thanking our panel. And I particularly want to thank all of you for your rich questions and comments. I feel like we've just begun this conversation, and I'm hoping you will continue it.